My name is Jake Schwab, and I am a digital learning coach with Georgetown ISD. We are going to cover some basic lesson design elements to keep in mind when designing for the one-to-one Chromebook environment. Let's take a look at what we will cover in this short video. First, we will talk about the basic considerations you need to keep in mind when designing lessons for a one-to-one Chromebook environment. We will then discuss what your lesson objectives are and what you need to consider. Next, we will talk about the usage of digital tools in your lessons, and then finally we will touch on the training that you need to offer students and colleagues as you introduce them to those tools for learning. When we were talking about our basic considerations, we need to start by considering our audience. Ask yourself what is appropriate to ask of your students. Each group of students is different and can vary wildly between grade levels, periods, or even depending on what time of the year you have them. Consider what they are capable of, as well as what is appropriate to ask them to be able to attempt. Oftentimes, you will be surprised what students are capable of doing, so set those expectations high, but not so high that you lose them. Next, think about your lesson objectives and what it is that you want your students to take away from your lesson. If you have this in mind prior to creating your lesson, you will have a better idea of what you need to do in order to get your students to achieve that goal. This is especially important when you start introducing tech tools. If you are not focused on the outcome of the lesson, you may include tools that do not contribute to the overall learning experience, which can cause management issues down the road. Another basic consideration when designing lessons for a one-to-one audience is what is your role in the learning process. As you and your students become more comfortable in a one-to-one learning environment, your role as the teacher changes. Is your role during this specific lesson more of a guide, a collaborator, or are you more involved as tech support? These are all vital roles, and you may play a little bit of each one to a varying degree. But this is something that you need to consider as you build out your lesson plan. Let's talk about your lesson objectives next. Each lesson contains multiple objectives for the learner, as well as for the teacher. It is vital that you keep this in mind as you design your lessons in the one-to-one classroom. In order to avoid the Chromebook from becoming the equivalent of just a worksheet, you need to purposefully approach the inclusion of the Chromebook into your lessons. Start thinking about the timing. How much time do you need to devote to the support of the technology? Will the technology add to or subtract from the amount of time that a lesson normally takes? Is this okay? These are all questions that you need to ask yourself as you work through the process of implementing this tool into your lessons. Think about the direction in which students are going with a specific lesson. Will the implementation of technology assist in this? Will the technology work to drive that change, or will it serve as a distraction? I think of education as guiding students to a deeper understanding of the world. Regardless of the subject, we are trying to impact student learning by guiding them in the pursuit of knowledge. As you design, think about how it is that you are guiding them. We know that students are entering a world filled with technology, and that doesn't appear to be changing anytime soon. How will your lesson assist them in utilizing technology in a way that meaningfully allows them to implement those tools outside of the classroom? A key element when talking about design is the delivery of the material. How will that material be delivered? What is your plan to get the learner in front of the material? We will be talking about this a little bit more in depth later, but for now, you should be thinking about how this fits into your overall objective for the lesson. Keeping students engaged in the learning is key. Using technology appropriately can help you keep students engaged and on task. Or you could be providing students with a tool that allows them to become disengaged. The number one concern I hear from teachers that are weary of using technology in the classroom is that they are worried that students will not be engaged with their lesson. We will discuss this aspect in the management piece of this course. You also need to consider whether or not your lesson is itself engaging. If you provide a lesson that is boring on a device that allows the student to tune out, they will take the path of least resistance to not be bored. The steps to design your lesson in a way that the students get a benefit from doing what it is that you want them to do. And finally, think about what the final product will look like. what are you asking the students to complete, and how does the technology play into that? Did the student do a lot of learning on the computer, only to complete a physical worksheet at the end? Does the student have a choice in how they represent their learning? Or are all students doing the same thing? Are students having to spend some of their energy learning the tool with which they are turning something in, instead of putting that brain activity towards the learning you are asking them to do? All of this is vitally important when designing your lessons. Now, as we look at this roadmap of a lesson, I want you to keep in mind everything we just talked about. All of those design elements are the fuel that drives the car, but we still have the windy road of curriculum to navigate. Think about those design elements as I address each of the following pieces. Pre-assessing students prior to a lesson or unit allows you to make adjustments based on what students do or do not know. Based on these results, you may wish to change your tech integration accordingly. I would suggest not trashing whatever you had planned before, but instead tweaking it to serve the needs of those students. Providing students with an opportunity to explore will instill a sense of ownership within the students and take away some of the management issues you may see otherwise. Having a checkpoint within a lesson can allow you to include or exclude the digital elements of a lesson based upon the needs of that learner. This can also provide students with a good time to self-evaluate their approach to learning in a digital world, teaching them that vital tool of time management. By the end of the lesson, it is our hope that students have mastered the content, but this could serve as an opportunity for a U-turn as well, should the student need it. One of the beautiful things about having a one-to-one learning environment is that there are 1,000,001 tools for students to use. Unfortunately, this is one of the biggest challenges as well. As you design your lessons, keep in mind that students are having to devote some of their learning bandwidth to not learning the content, but rather the tool with which you are asking them to demonstrate their understanding. If we only start with one tool, but then move on to the next, and then the next, and then the next, students are going to get overwhelmed by the amount of different tools they are asked to use. In order to gain the biggest return on this in a one-to-one classroom, keep these 3 ideas in mind when designing your lesson. What tools are absolutely necessary for your course? Do you teach a math course that requires a certain website? Then that makes the list, whereas another tool may not make the cut because it isn't necessary. What tools are you comfortable using? If you aren't familiar with a tool, it isn't a good idea to introduce it to students. You are the frontline tech support, and students will look to you for help when something doesn't go as planned. If you are unable to help them, or they sense that you are unfamiliar with the tool, you will lose them. And finally, where will this tool get students, and how does it assist them with their learning? Every tool that you include should serve a purpose, which is to enhance the learning experience. If the tool doesn't provide any substance to the lesson, ditch it. The biggest issue that I see when teachers are trying to teach in a one-to-one environment is that they don't take into consideration the fact that they need to train their students in how to use these devices in a learning environment. I want to address a few thoughts on this before moving on. First thing that we have to consider is that these students are digital natives, meaning that they were born into a world consumed by technological advances. The internet has always existed, and phones have always fit in their pockets. These students have had the opportunity to grow up with technology, but they have not used it in the way we are asking them to now. I once heard a teacher getting upset with a student because they didn't know how to format a spreadsheet. This is not something that teenagers typically seek out to learn on their own time, so we need to teach them. Not all of the digital tools are intuitive. Plan to take time to teach the tool, and you will save your students from shutting down. Not all programs are supported by GISD. You may need to be your own tech advocate. While digital learning coaches can support as much as possible, there are simply so many tools out there that we don't know all of them. Another thing that you need to realize is that there are times when technology goes down or changes. You need to be flexible when teaching in a one-to-one environment. Make sure that you have a backup plan in case a website crashes or the internet goes down. If you know ahead of time that a website is blocked for students, you can submit it and create an alternate plan should it not be approved. If you wait until the day of the lesson to check things out, you could find yourself in a pickle. The last thing we will discuss concerning training is that you need to train students on what your class looks like in different situations. There will be situations where you are lecturing. Train the students what technology use looks like during that time. If you don't want them being distracted by the devices during your instruction, have them close the Chromebook or turn it towards you so that it doesn't take their attention away. Conversely, there will be times when students will be self-sufficient on their Chromebooks. Train them what this looks like. Time management, charging their device, knowing where to store files and how to retrieve them. These are all things that students need to be trained on in order to be successful in a one-to-one environment. I would like to leave you with this quote by Matthew Guyon, a learning experience designer. Think about what your learners need to do with that information after the course is finished and design around that. As you work your way through your PD, please reach out to either instructor with any questions or concerns. Thank you.